longer sorrow. I forget what I was trying to say. I no longer do what I was gonna do, but you're no good for me. That's why me know what send me if it could flee. Me have to take away me say. Me have to take away me say. Me have to hide like a thief in the night. Me have to get out the side. Me have to take away me say. Take away me say.
Greetings, kings and queens. Welcome to another Real Stuff podcast. Today is Tuesday. And when it's Tuesday, as I always say, there is an election going on somewhere in the United States of America. It could be a county election, a commissioner election, a school board election. If you don't believe me, Google it and you'll find it. But today on Indigenous Outlook, we have two of the greatest females. I said two of the greatest female because one I call the queen and the other one is the professor. We have this morning with us Miss Victoria Grieves-Williams and also Miss Cynthia M. Ellis, aka Queen Lubafu. And both ladies will be coming here and they will be talking to us about what is happening in the indigenous community. So stick and stay, don't go nowhere. I have Flavius, Courtney, and also Francine will be joining us later. With us, a lot of guests will be linking up as well. So sit and stay, don't go nowhere.
Through the door, take away ourselves.
Yes, indeed. Top of the morning, everyone. Top of the morning. Welcome to the Real Stuff podcast. Let me ask, Courtney, Flavius, what's happening in your neck of the woods? Unmute your mic for me, gentlemen. Gonna start with Courtney first. What's happening in your neck of the woods?
Well, top of the morning, Franco. Top of the morning to all our listeners and viewers. It's sunny but cool. And I'm like feeling the fall weather here in New Jersey. The beginning of the fall weather. Yeah, so really a beautiful day. And my expectations for today is that we, on the podcast, that we'll get some interesting information on all of that. For our edification.
All right.
But I'd like to just extend to our listeners and viewers that they should go listen to that Africa Caribbean CARICOM Summit, because there were some very interesting speakers. I listened to it for about an hour and a half, and man, it was mind blowing. So I'd encourage our people to go listen to that on YouTube.
All right, brother, man. Thank you. Flavius, what's happening in your neck of the woods?
Well, much like Courtney, we have sun but cool, and of course we are still on our last day of our 3-day no movement. So everybody is indoors. Everything is very, very quiet, Yesterday was the first day of school, virtual school, because we can't have any face-to-face yet, because the government is saying we don't have a large enough percentage of students being vaccinated, But like Courtney said, it was a beautiful way to start this morning with the African Caribbean Summit with the heads of government. It was wonderful.
All right, all right. So let me ask Tanya, what's happening in your neck of the woods this morning, Tanya, or this evening, or this afternoon?
Well, this afternoon it's a lovely day here in Adelaide. Spring's coming to our country, and I've been doing my university studies and hanging out with my daughter.
All right, good.
Sounds good.
Cool, cool.
Yeah, Australia's on lockdown, COVID, so there's not much that we can really do down here.
What a whole heap of lockdown.
No, everybody locked down.
Let me ask.
Hi, Egbert.
Let me ask Egbert, what is happening in your neck of the woods? I know it's bright and early for you in LA. Let me unmute your mic there. Unmute your mic. All right, there you go.
Yeah, the little woods of Belize, we are asserting our rights there in the village of St. Bite, where we are trying to tell the gas station that just went in there without consultation that they're not doing the right thing and the right way to go about development. So that's our fight there in Belize, in St. Bite village.
Okay. So you're in Belize, Belize now this morning? Egbert, you're in Belize now as we speak? You're not hearing me? I don't think he's hearing me. All right, let's go to Vicky. Vicky, what's happening in your neck of the woods? I know you're all the way up there in New York.
Greetings, all my friends in Jamaica and the broader Caribbean. And of course, I'm delighted to see Tanya come along this morning, one of my fellow Aboriginal people from Australia. I'm living on the lands of the Warraimaay people of the Lenape tribe of the Algonquin language group here in a city called Newburgh on the Hudson River. I want to acknowledge them for their truly beautiful country. I understand that many of these people were moved out in the very early period of colonisation and live in other parts of the states, including Oklahoma and Wisconsin. This country is amazingly beautiful. As I said, we're coming into fall and the trees are just starting to turn. So for an Australian, it's quite a different experience to be here. And we're all in lockdown. Play that music again. That was nice. We're all in lockdown.
All right. What a whole heap of lockdown. So let me ask, the thinking bean, what's happening in your neck of the woods this morning?
Yes, good to be with you in the company of these illustrious ladies and your co-host, Flavors and Courtney. Flavors has correctly and precisely said the things that I would say. It's very sunny here in Portmore, in St. Catherine, the place, as I said, vying for the third city of Jamaica, and all is well so far. Calm, no news, no bad news, or even good news yet. We're just normal today. Thank you.
Hope it remain on that same level. No bad news.
No bad news, I hope.
All right. Here comes Francine. Our next co-host is joining us. So Flavius, let me see if we can bring in Francine. Let me get her audio up. Top of the morning, Francine.
Good morning, one and all. Good morning. It's so
Morning,
good.
Francine.
Morning, Francine.
I'm gonna hit you with it as you come in. What's happening in your neck of the woods?
So far, so good. I'm alive and I am, missing you all, but I am here this morning. Work as usual. Just taking a few moments to be with you, but I'm here.
All right. Give thanks that you're alive and that you're still helping. You're on the front line. You're one of the frontline workers. So big up to all the frontline workers along with yourself. All right.
All right. Thank you.
All right. So Flavius, I'm gonna give you upbeat music, and after this upbeat music, I want you to introduce Vicky for me this morning.
Sure.
All right. I'm going to give you this song. I like it because it's talking about women, high-end woman. And I think Vicky and Queen Lubafu are two of the iron ladies in the modern time as well. So here we go. TC, take it away for me.
Iron, 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 making the iron, 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 making iron, 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 making the iron, 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 making iron, 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 making the iron, 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 making iron, 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 making the iron, 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 making
iron, the iron lady. Yes, I'm the iron. After Thatcher, it's TC. The best deal must get the hottest flame, and I get burned time and time again. So not a damn thing I have to lose. I paid my dues. Never gifted a silver spoon. Catch bus sometimes I walk to school. Born in the pine, raised in the farm. That's why none of them can do me harm. Cause I've been through the flood and I walked through the fire. Blood, sweat and tears.
All right, Flavius, go ahead.
Okay, it's my great pleasure in introducing my friend, Professor Victoria Grieves-Williams. She is one of the foremost authority on Indigenous knowledge in the world. Let me just read a little of what her bio says. Professor Victoria Grieves-Williams is an Aboriginal person, Warraimaay, from the mid-north coast of north-southwest, and an historian. Victoria's research interest includes colonial history, particularly history of Aboriginal families, race, gender, and intersectionality, particularly as played out within Australian society in the colonial period and during WW2. Indigenous well-being and mental health as relates to contemporary psychology, food, water, sustainability in Aboriginal communities, and all of this in the context of Anthropocene. Victoria has published in Australian Aboriginal history, particularly on the history of the Aboriginal family, in Indigenous knowledge production in Australia, particularly about Aboriginal philosophy and well-being, and in environmental humanities. She is passionate about Aboriginal activism and the need for a just and proper settlement, and to this end has published in Aboriginal politics and the impact of media on Aboriginal activism. Professor Victoria has published widely in newspapers and online in the conversation, as well as being an invited blogger for the Sydney Environmental Institute, SEI, the Australian Women's History Network, AWHN, and the Australian Critical Race and Wellness Studies Association, ACRAWSA. She edits the Maroon magazine for the Maroon people of Charlestown, Jamaica. Victoria has worked as a consultant to governments, advising and reviewing projects, policy and programs to do with Aboriginal people and the policies of programs that impact on their lives. The Real Stuff podcast welcomes Professor Victoria Grieves-Williams.
Flavius, thank you so much for that very generous introduction. I hope you can just bear with me today, because I want a little time to explain to you about the Anthropocene and the role of Indigenous people, or more especially the fate of Indigenous people with the Anthropocene. First of all, I want to talk about what it is. What is the Anthropocene? And to talk about the Anthropocene you need to talk about time, and more especially deep time, because scientists only know that we're in a new age by what's being laid down in the Earth's crust at the moment. So, you know, as a child, I was always fascinated with these diagrams of layers. If you went down far enough, you got to the dinosaurs. You know, that was exciting. Well, the layer that's being put down in the Earth's crust now is overwhelmingly the result of human activity on Earth. And it includes, importantly, radioactivity. I mean, all of us in the world, no matter how remote you are, they're able to find human remains through radioactivity. We're storing that in our bodies. That's going down in the Earth's crust, not only from bodies, but from everywhere. For example, and plastics. Plastics only emerged since World War II, but they are becoming a really major part of what's going down in the Earth's crust. Then we have the detritus of war. So what I want to explain to you is that the Anthropocene, which means the age of humans, started, it's still being debated when it started, but it at least started with the Industrial Revolution. Maybe it started with the beginning of agriculture, but it's really like, you know, if you like, in biblical terms, it is the loss of innocence of human beings. When human beings came out of nature, came out of that, if you like, the bosom of nature that was there to nurture us. And so I tend to think of Indigenous people around the world as the people of the Holocene. That was the period we thought we were in until the Anthropocene happened. So about 12,000 years ago, scientists are able to say this period called the Holocene started. In that period, the Holocene, man lived in nature. Indigenous peoples around the world learnt to accommodate the needs of nature alongside their own, and they had various complex ways of doing this. What I want to talk to you about is how Aboriginal people have understood their place in nature, and you can do that by looking at the Aboriginal concept of time. Now, in the West, we think of time as a progression. Not so much now. People aren't really fooled by this much anymore, that we're progressing. In the world today, where we have to, it's not just people complaining about the time they live in. There are definite signs through climate change, indicators and so on, that, you know, we're actually living on a dying Earth. So there's been so much human activity on Earth that that we're affecting our own environment to the point where we're actually threatening the lives of future generations. So for Aboriginal people, time is not progressive. Time, it's been called every when. Aboriginal people in Australia have been observed and listened to by many, many anthropologists and other observers. And what they've come up with is this idea that Aboriginal people celebrate life for what it is. Aboriginal people tend to celebrate every day of life, and at the same time, life is sacred. It's sacred and it's celebrated. So when we die, we go back into eternal time. So Aboriginal people have a concept of eternal time existing in the now. And we see that because there are indicators called eruptions of the dreaming that come into normal time. There's signs. One of my aunties told me a story of seeing a tree, one tree, waving furiously in the forest. I won't tell you the whole story about that, but it was a sign, and it is a sign from our ancestors. So Western observers have called Indigenous people around the world ancestor worshippers. We're not ancestor worshippers so much as we venerate them and we want to be as good as they ever were. So our ancestors are back there in eternal time, which also runs along beside us, and they are the ones that give us the paradigms for how we should be behaving now. And those paradigms are locked in the landscape, in certain formations in the landscape. They're locked in the constellations. People with the knowledge can tell the stories to give us the information we need in order to be better people every day. This is really the innocence of Indigenous people that Westerners commented on when they went to Africa, when they came to the Caribbean, when they came to Australia. They couldn't believe the innocence of our people. And I won't say any more about that, but you all know what I'm talking about. So just to bring us into the contemporary time and modern day thinkers, there's a historian in the UK by the name of Jenkins, who in the early 90s, he said, history is dead. And of course, the history establishment was outraged. How could history be dead? But you think about it. History has grown up through the colonial enterprise. History started in order to record the deeds of great white men. And colonization, in the form that it originally was, it's morphed into different forms, of course, but really it's over. Colonization is over. There is, and all of the things that we're so engaged with right now, things to do with racism, colonization, reparations, truth-telling, apologies. I can imagine a time in the future when all of that's going to be very little at all. It's going to mean very little at all, because human beings on Earth are going to be caught in the position of raw survival because of the breakdown of all the systems that we are so dependent on right now. So what's happening in the world, because of, I think it's about 9 billion humans we have on Earth right now. And this is a result of population growth that's brought on all these processes. In fact, as a historian myself, I can see history, the history of colonization and of slavery, as coming out of the Anthropocene. These are anthropogenic, that's my word, anthropocentric. I'm trying to make up a word, but you know what I'm saying. Like, they are actually indicators, they are a result of the huge growth of human beings on Earth. And let me tell you, I was trying to look up the figures. It's something like, I mean, people in the Caribbean might know better than me. 50 million Africans were transported out of Africa to Brazil, Caribbean, Latin America, and North America. And that transportation stopped sometime in the 19th century, right? There's 50 million people at least, it could be more. From 1850 to 1930 was the greatest wave of migration in the earth. So people talk about, colonization being damaging, but colonization opened up places like Australia to huge waves of immigration that's also extraordinarily oppressive of our people, right? And think about this, 50 million Chinese moved out of China from 1850 to 1930. 50 million Europeans moved, right? And something like 30 million South Asians. These are extraordinary figures about human movement around the world, and every one of those movements was oppressive of the local Indigenous people. You know, the locals suffered. Right, so I don't know if I need to go into the impact of the Anthropocene with you anymore. I've talked about the collapse of systems, but we're going to have climate shocks. You know, Cyclone Sandy hit the States, maybe, was it 10 years ago? Then we've had this other Henri and then Ida. People are still not prepared. People don't have the resources to get prepared. There's so many deaths. I mean, people in the Caribbean know a lot about climate shocks and the changes in the weather systems that can wreak havoc. But given the bigger picture of the world, the big problem we've got is the melting of the ice caps. So there are huge implications. With the melting, it's happening in the Arctic. Sea levels are rising. There was a prediction that Florida would be underwater by 1850. Now scientists cannot predict anymore. They're not prepared to predict because things are happening in a rush. You know, one collapse is going to bring on another. It's going to be so that all of a sudden, what do we do? Can you think of all the people from Florida as climate change refugees in the north of America? Do you understand that this is going to increase the conflict? This is a big thing with the Anthropocene. There's an increase in aggression, in human conflict, and already we're seeing the increase in war. You know, the war in Syria, for example, the war in Syria became war for the sake of war. The Allies changed sides so many times. My head was spinning. I couldn't follow Syria anymore. But, you know, I'm not a war watcher generally. They're bombing the arse out of all these different parts of the world, and nobody seems to understand why. There's a huge amount of irrational behaviour associated with the Anthropocene. I mean, we have it anyway. We certainly had it with slavery and colonisation, but it's multiplying. It's multiplying. You think about it, storm on the Capitol, all of these things. It's going to be much more strife, much more struggle. So I'm spending a bit too much time on that. I want to get on to talk about the qualities that Indigenous people have in their ways of being and in their philosophies that are going to help us. The qualities we need to be thinking about fostering, absolutely, and getting close to in order for our people to be able to survive. A big thing about Aboriginal ways of being is the balance between autonomy, that is, I'm a person in my own right, I have a point of view, I have a right to say what I want, blah, 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 and connectedness. I also have responsibilities to other people. I have responsibilities to my kin, to my family, to my people. So this is a big thing that was really juggled, if you like, in a way to opposites, but in the way that children were raised within Aboriginal culture. So this is going to be a very important way of being in the future, to have autonomy, to be able to move quickly, to think quickly, to know who you are, what that means, who your allies are, who you can rely on, blah, blah, blah. But also having connectedness, that is, you have a network of like-minded people who are working in the same way that you are and that you can rely on. So into this comes the importance of ethics and values and accountability. They all have to be imbued in people to be able to work together in the future and not just be fighting. And I say that seriously. Another quality in Indigenous life in Australia was the lack of materialism. So what we have, what's been generated by the West, what we are compelled towards doing, what we actually become addicted to are the things that the West offers us as consumers. Okay, so, I could say, people recreate in America by going to the mall. People recreate by buying. People, it's all about materialism. Aboriginal people in Australia wore as a badge of pride, they didn't need stuff. They didn't need stuff. And so what you have in place of that is a life that is very rich with producing culture. So you have a life that is rich with song and dance and mimicry and theatre and, I guess the quality that you need in order to be able to live in a non-materialistic world is gratitude, being grateful, understanding your life is sacred, and understanding that you make the most of every day as you go. So, this is a common thing amongst Indigenous people around the world. I've had the opportunity to travel and visit a lot of Indigenous people, and the thing that marks Indigenous culture is the idea that it's much better to give than to receive. So you're not looking to rip off the next person for the mighty dollar. You're not forming relationships with people in order to exploit them economically. There has to be a different modus operandi. This has to be a conscious change in people to be able to survive the future. So the thing, just one more thing I would mention before I finish is that one of the things that marks the Anthropocene is the growth of wicked problems. That is, problems that have no solution. There is no solution to, many things that are now emerging. So whereby, the idea of progress, we'll find a solution where we're progressing, moving onwards and upwards. With wicked problems, they're things you have to learn to live with. So, for example, I don't know, there are many examples, I guess, of wicked problems, but let's just say, one of your food sources disappears. It's no longer available. Well, you'll never have that food again. That species is dead or whatever, but you find a way to work around it. Individual people, and I talk about autonomy, individual people are going to have a little bit of knowledge about a lot of things. We're going to have to know how to supply the nutrients to ourselves and our families in a way, and food supplies and so on, that we've not done before. People will have to increasingly grow their own food. We're going to have to rely on local sources of food. So there might be bartering and trading and so on. But the interesting thing to me is that while Indigenous people have been seen as the people who've borne the brunt of the Anthropocene, tsunamis, hurricanes, sea level rises, and disappearance of species and all these things, Indigenous people have to deal with these things first. They've had to deal with them first, but the truth is that Indigenous people around the world already have a lot of things in place that will help them to survive when they go back to their own cultural roots and look for the values and the ethics of the Holocene. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vicky. Thank you very much. I think I see Queen Lubafu Iseini in the building. So, Queen Lubafu, could you go ahead and unmute your mic?
Yes, Franco. My apologies I was on the road, and with your permission, can you hear me well?
Yes, I'm hearing you. I'm hearing you. I don't know how well.
With your permission, I will just show my face briefly and then keep up the video so that the reception maintains itself. Is that okay?
That's perfect. That's perfect. Words is what we want to hear this morning.
All right. I just want to say my piece that I am who I am. Do you see me?
Not yet. All right, a little bit. Tilt up the camera a little bit more. Huh?
Okay. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's good enough. Welcome.
I'm going to turn it off, okay?
Yeah, you can turn it off. Go ahead now.
Okay, good. So it's really an honor. Wow.
Something's frozen.
Okay, that's why I turned it off. It's an honor and a privilege to be here this morning.
Thank you.
Garifuna from the Garifuna Nation, and I am ambassador at large for the Garifuna Nation. I'm located right now in Belize, but I just wanted to say that a little bit about the Garifuna Nation. I want to thank our sister who has just shared with us, because we consider ourselves as one. We consider ourselves in alignment. We consider ourselves as relatives from around the world. And right now, the Indigenous people, the Garifuna people, we are aligned with our ancestry of both African and Indigenous. And we are stretching our hands out to our brothers and sisters all over the world, because what we are feeling now is a shift, a major shift in terms of hearing the voices and a deeper appreciation of the spirit of the Indigenous people. We are the people that the United Nations declared, we the Garifuna, in 2004 as a gift to humanity. In spite of that, however, our people continue to suffer in places like Honduras, where our people are being massacred for holding on to the sacred lands of the Garifuna people. In fact, in my journey here this morning, I have come from a place called Saint Bite, which is one of the sacred lands of the Garifuna. And right beside one of our sacred temples, a gas station is being built. It is not that we do not want development or to interact with so-called development as is perceived as the colonizers saw it or see it. It is that we want to be respected. We want our people to be honored with the sacredness of who we are as a nation. Garifuna Nation, we have two aspects of our being. One is that every Garifuna is part of the nation. We are not part of an organization because we were here before the Europeans came to the Americas. In fact, there is strong evidence that our people were traders from Africa to different parts of the Americas before the Europeans came. So that is one aspect of who we are. And we call our state of being Garifuna Duao. And anywhere a Garifuna is in any part of the world, we are part of the nation. But for purposes of interacting with the present mechanisms and structures that were developed by colonization, we are also organized as a legal entity in different parts and different countries in the world. So here in Belize, I am the focal point person for the Garifuna Nation. And wherever we are in the world, I am designated as ambassador at large for the Garifuna Nation. We are a people who are destined or experience genocide over a period of years, particularly in the 1600s and the 1700s, because we refused and resisted enslavement. We are a people who have never been enslaved, and that is part of the history and the state of being that we are continuing to persevere with. And as the story of Indigenous people, because we have certain moral principles in terms of how we interact with the earth and how we interact with other people, that way of being was abused, and we were assaulted, and we have experienced genocide. One of the high points of our story is that we were pressed and pushed away from certain Caribbean islands and left to die on the island of Balisao. And that is reflected in many of our songs, our stories, and our way of being. As Indigenous people, we combine with African and Carib and Taino, what we call Indians in the Caribbean. So we were initially called Black Caribs. However, we call ourselves Garifuna. In this state of time, in this time of our Renaissance, we are aligning with our brothers and sisters around the world, particularly in the Americas, as we focus on the authenticity of who we have been and who we are and who we are becoming. We are aligning with the Maroons in Suriname, in the Caribbean islands, in Jamaica, in Trinidad, in Dominica, in St. Lucia, in the United States of America. We are aligning with the Native American people in Canada, in the United States, in Central America, in South America. And now, my sister, we would like to stretch our hands across to Australia and all the other peoples who are having the same cry and the same language. More significantly for us as Garifuna people, we are stretching our hands to Africa, because Africa is one of the major threads, foundation of our ancestry. We are not blaming anyone for the situation that we are in at this time. Our spirit is a movement through which we are claiming and reclaiming and repossessing what was stolen. However, in order to do that, we are affirming that it is our responsibilities. It is none but ourselves who is going to bring about this realignment. So we have certain themes that we are promoting: saving ourselves, saving our sons, saving our families today from the trauma that we are healing from. We are acknowledging that we have experienced trauma, and what we are experiencing today has a root. So by going back into the essence of who we are, who we have been as Garifuna people, where we believe that I am for you and you are for me, and we have a love for humanity, we have a love for nature, we have a love for the earth. We are not beggars, we are not begging. We know that food sovereignty is the capacity that we have had to be able to feed ourselves from the environment. We know that in the area of health and wellness and Garifuna spirituality and Indigenous spirituality, we have the capacity, with the knowledge of the plants, with the knowledge of the trees, with our own knowledge, with the food that we eat, that we have the capacity to be able to heal ourselves. We know that through our settlement by the ocean, by the sea, by our skills to have been able to cross the waters, that we have the capacity to relate in our way to sustain ourselves. We know that the issue of land is not just about the physical ownership or competition for land. It is a sacredness in terms of our relationship with the land. We know that the relationship with land has to do with the level of consciousness and awareness. So here specifically in Belize, we are aligning with the Maya community, which won this record-breaking case, the Maya land right case, where the Maya, the Indigenous Maya, our brothers and sisters, took the government of Belize to court for securing and claiming and embracing the rights to their land. we know that even though the government of Belize has not honored the case, and our brothers and sisters had to go to the Caribbean Court of Justice to stake their claim, we know that whether the case is won or not, the voice of the Indigenous people is being heard. And that is the most powerful part of this conversation today. Because I want to leave room for a question or for discussion, I will pause at this moment to say that we are in a upgrade or acceleration of our movement at this time, as we are connecting with Indigenous people all over Belize, all over Central America, all over Caribbean, and all over the world. I thank you for the honor and for the privilege to be able to share some of the cries of our people at this time, not with a cry of tragedy or succumbing to trauma, but a cry of victory, that we are overcomers and reclaiming once and for all that we are a people with dignity. We are people who are royal. We are people who are kings. We are people who are queens. We are people who stretch our hands to the first Caribbean nation, Haiti. It may look that Haiti is suffering blow after blow after blow. However, we are embracing the resilience and the strength and the sacredness of our people and who we are. Thank you. Sereme Niebo.
Shlohale Wadani, our time has come.
Okay. We're going to open up for questions, and hope we can get some questions out there from all of you who are joining us on Zoom, and for those who are in the YouTube chat room, welcome to the Real Stuff podcast. So, is there any questions for Vicky and for Queen Lubafu? Go ahead, Harold.
Yes, thank you very much. Thanks, Queen. The Queen, thanks a lot. I was educated in such a very high way. Vicky, you helped me to understand a holistic picture of the world. One of the ideas that I've always been intrigued by, because I love and adore women, and I've often thought about our women, not only in the period of enslavement, but going back to the times of the indigenous peoples. How did, and I hope this is not too sensitive for you, but how did women deal with the monthly cycle? How did they deal with childbirth and sexuality? I'm interested in the first one because, to me, this part of a woman's life is very sacred, and I know a lot of myths have been associated with it, but how did they survive without modern gadgets to deal with that monthly cycle? What can you tell me about that, and tell us about that? Thank you.
Errol, I'm so glad that you asked that question, because I realized it was something that I left out of the talk that I gave, and that is that in the period of the Holocene, the human population stayed small. And in fact, for my own people, Warraimaay, I was able to ascertain through the paintings of a convict artist in our country. He did quite a series of paintings of Warraimaay families, and you only see 2 children in each family group. So in fact, they were just reproducing the existing population. It wasn't increasing. Maybe there'd be 3 children, but given that there's a shorter lifespan, though I'm not really. I mean, historians say that, but the Aboriginal lifespan in Australia right now is really short. Anyway, it's probably as short as it was pre-contact. And that'd be another research project to go into that. But I was had the opportunity to talk to a good friend of mine, a native historian by the name of Donald Grinday, who lives in Buffalo recently. And he's very engaged with these issues to do with the future too. And one thing that he said to me really resonated with me. He said, one of the worst things that has happened through, or what has happened through colonisation of Indigenous people is the loss of women's power. So the loss of women's capacity to manage their own bodies, really. And this is, the way that the tropes that are set up in Australia about Aboriginal savagery and so on is that Aboriginal women are very victimised by their men. There may be instances of that now with alcohol and so on, but the culture is not about that. The culture is not. We have women's business and we have men's business. We have meetings of women and of men. And one of the things that anthropologists found really hard to deal with and government officials, like they go out to visit Aboriginal groups, they have meetings with the men, and the men won't give them an answer. They won't make a decision. And there's Aboriginal people, they don't know how to blah, blah, blah. But the men don't make a decision until they've conferred with the women. Because little does the government official know, but the women are talking about this too. And they talk about it on their own without men present, right or wrong. Western feminism says we should all be in the mix together. Well, I don't know. Sometimes it's much better for me to be in the company of women. And no offense to men. Men have their roles, of course. But, I think it's a natural thing. In our culture, women were making things together. They were gathering together, they were singing together, they were telling stories together. Men were out doing other things, playing football. I don't know what they were doing, but, it's really nothing to do with us, what men do. We have that way of seeing the world. So I know it's a bit of a mystery, isn't it, how families were kept small. One thing that's occurred to me is abstinence. Highly circumscribed ways of people being together and so on. And but some of those things have to remain a mystery. And there've been, famously a miner trying to argue that Aboriginal people aren't worthy of any land rights because he said that Aboriginal people were cannibals and that we practiced infanticide. There were certainly instances of infanticide observed in the colonial period when babies were born as a result of rape by white men. We might be able to understand some of the emotions behind that. I'm not sure that women would agree. But if men are in a position where they're fighting a war, and there was an undeclared war in Australia, there's no question about that, if certain things have to be done. War is another society entirely. It doesn't necessarily reflect on the way people usually are. Yeah, it's a good question. And I guess all of those questions about, infanticide, for example, come into it. Maybe, who knows, maybe there were sacrifices made for the sake of the natural world. It's hard for us to get our head around that, influenced as we are by Judeo-Christian ways of being, but it's a mystery to me. And of course, this is an ongoing problem. It's going to be an ongoing problem while women are fertile. If it happens that things that occur in this kind of chaotic period of the Anthropocene, things that occur will render women infertile. Even now, there are indicators that women are less fertile in a lot of parts of the world than they've been before. But the question of human reproduction and sexuality remains in this overcrowded, disgustingly overcrowded world. I mean, humans are, I was thinking about this morning, you could actually say human beings are the most narcissistic of the animal world. We put our right to live and be on this earth above every other creature, such that we're killing them out without even trying. There's no big picture thinking about what's going to go on in the world. What are we going to do? At least China tried to restrict their family sizes, and they were castigated for doing it. But thank you, China, for doing that, or we'd be in a worse position today than we are. And can I say to you, and this is a sensitive topic, I know it is in the Caribbean, particularly in Jamaica, but this is why I'm extremely tolerant of, the gender bending. I'm extremely tolerant of people who want to have sexual relationships with people of their own sex. Number one, it's none of my business. I don't expect anyone to make it their business what my sexual life is, so it's none of my business. And number two, maybe they're doing us all a favour because they don't reproduce. And some of those couples actually take up the care of children who would not be cared for in other situations. I know in America now, Steve Buttigieg and his partner have just adopted twins. They will give them a beautiful life. There's no question. They're good people.
Vicky, sorry to cut in like that, but could you discuss some of the real solutions to Anthropocene? Because I know that I give a little more explanation, because I know that using the word, maybe sort of intellectual for some of our viewers, and some people may not really go and look up the meaning. But can you just give a little more detailed explanation and some possible solutions?
That's Courtney, is it?
Yes, this is Courtney.
Hi, Courtney. Well, I know it's a big word. It's a bit daunting. When I first saw it, I first saw it about 2010, and I found out that it was first coined by German scientists, I think, in 1996 or something. It's still not accepted by a lot of people. But, the scene on the end of it is something to do with deep time, like Pleistocene and Holocene. But the anthro part is human. So it's an age of humans. That's simple. I don't think there is any solution. It's not going to be stopped now. People started talking about the problems with overpopulation. Well, Malthus, have you heard of him? He was back in the 18th century or something saying, well, look, it's just a matter of maths. Look at what we're doing here. It's a matter of maths. And but in the 1970s, people who were aware started to ring the alarm bells. And, the death of the natural world was Rachel Carson wrote a book, The Silent Spring, I think, was that what it's called. But we're moving towards a future we can't actually predict or describe. And the thing is, the situation will never be normal again. Now, when I think of experiences that I had as a child, I had the opportunity to walk through certain forests. Forests have a feeling. forests have a character of their own. It is a little bit emotional for me because I won't be able to walk through those places again. They don't exist. So people are scrambling all over the world to save the last bits of the natural world they can. But it won't be natural. I mean, you have a national park here in the States that's tramped over by thousands of people. It's no longer a natural world, you know. And the clock can't be turned back. What we're in now, right now, is the perilous situation. And what we need to do is to find ways to be able to live with it, to anticipate nothing but sudden shocks and change. My friend Sam Altman is there from Sydney, and Sam published in the Maroon magazine about this, that there will be shock after shock. We don't know when. We don't know how. It's going to affect different parts of the world differently. But one thing with wildfires, that we can do something to ameliorate the fact that like the whole world will burn unless we do something. This part of the States, New York State, is supposed to be extremely well watered. I'm an Australian here, and I notice I've got Australian eyes and looking at the bush, you know, and I see dead trees, I see a lot of forest litter, and I see streams that don't seem to be running, a bit of a trickle, right? And I asked some old timers, they said, yes, it's been in drought for at least 8 years, and the streams don't run the way they did. We don't have the same amount of snow. We don't have the snow melt we had. Change, not going to go back. It's not going to go back. Now we've got the melting of the, what do they call the frozen ground near the Arctic?
Ice caps or the glaciers or what?
Well, the glaciers are melting, that's for sure, but permafrost, where the ground is permanently frozen. In Siberia, that released all this methane gas, and have you seen, look up on the web, the wildfires in Siberia. They're probably the largest in the world. They don't get into our news. Everyone talks about Australian wildfires. Yeah, sure, we got them. We also got them in California, in Oregon, in other states of the USA. Wildfire meaning a fire out of control, nobody can stop it. And of course, in Asia, even in the UK, there was a wildfire this season. Indigenous people, well, in Australia, the Europeans turned up and they thought they'd found a park. It was because we kept the forest clean through regulated burning. And it's a part of the ritual of caring for the earth, keeping it clean. My mother makes me laugh. She's driving along in the car and she'd see all this broken down tree stumps, and she'd say it needs a good clean up. She used to love and go and set fire to things and clean them up. My mother, it's an Aboriginal thing. Fire cleans. The smoke, when you have them, it feels like it's cleaning. It's a spiritual thing as well. But yes, there's no plan for land management. There's no plan for people management in the earth. And, Texas has brought in this dreadful, anti-abortion bill, which makes the lives of young women miserable. I mean, we're not teaching young women how to care for themselves in a spiritual way and their own bodies. And, they're growing up being vulnerable to all kinds of things. And then we force them to have children they may not want or know how to look after or have the means to look after. This is not a solution to the bigger problem we've faced in the earth. You know, somehow we've got to let go of the outdated morality questions. The outdated morality questions, and start to think of people as struggling just as we are.
Okay.
So, no solutions. I'm sorry. No solutions until I think the solutions have to be local and collective. You make your own networks. The thing about Indigenous people got them already. We've got a lot of networks. And so what we do is we start to do things like thinking about what's going to happen to us when this happens. How do we prepare for that?
Excuse me there, Vicky. We're going to bring in Queen Lubafu. She have her hands up. I think maybe she has some answers there.
Yes. Thank you, Brother Franco, because my focus is on solutions. And I really want to thank Sister Victoria for sharing her perspective. I honor and respect a lot of it, and we have the same experience. However, I'm very excited to share that many years ago, 60 of us from all over the world were selected as leaders from around the world through the Kellogg Foundation. And one of the reasons why I was invited to be a part of this network, because we were considering some of these very issues. Some of us here in Belize and around the region were considering that in many of our communities, we don't have access to doctors, but we have access to our midwives. So like, for example, my aunts and many of the elders delivered the babies in our villages without losing one single one. In fact, the community that I just came from, the midwife is still functional, and there are many in our country who are still functional. So as I listen to my sister sharing, I am feeling very encouraged about what is going on here. And recently I noticed that the reason why we were invited to be a part of this network was because we were beginning to vision how it is we could have an alignment and could be proactive in terms of addressing these issues. That was many years ago, and it is still ongoing. And I noticed that there is a grant that was recently approved by the foundation where they're focusing on training midwives in Alabama in the South. So that is very encouraging indeed. In terms of the earth, we have an outreach here in Belize. We have the second largest barrier reef in the world in the Americas, and we were having challenges about our barrier reef being destroyed. So we have an outreach called Fragments of Hope, where we have been restoring the reef, and it has been a very excellent and powerful experience. We also have relationship with the forest. My ancestral husband was a custodian or responsible for the rainforests, for the archaeological sites, the pyramids of our ancient people here in Belize. And one of them is called El Pilar. It's the only site of its kind in the Americas where a Maya archaeological site is protected and shaded under the canopy of the rainforest. We have 5,000 acres of pristine rainforest, which I try to go to every single time I can. I was there a few days ago, and what amazes me is the capacity of us to learn from nature, the nurturing ability of nature to regenerate itself. And as a human being, I am very inspired by that as an Indigenous person. And yes, sister, what you're talking about in terms of burning, we call it the Milpa cycle here. And the Garifuna people are closely aligned with the Maya people. I was with my 91-year-old mother a few days ago. I was sitting at her feet when she told me the story that she chose to have a midwife deliver me, a Maya midwife deliver me rather than go to the hospital. I have experienced my daughter who lives in Germany, where people in Germany and different parts of the world are interested and open to embracing the indigenous way of being. So there is a lot of hope that we can explore in this conversation. So I want to thank you for bringing up those points. But I think that the solution is exactly in what we are doing right now, developing networks, exchanging information, exchanging and communicating with each other. We are connected with the women of Liberia, for example, where the women of Liberia decided enough is enough in terms of the violence that they were experiencing in their country. And the women were the ones who took a stand. And that is why they received the Nobel Peace Prize, because they said that we are the ones we have been waiting for. So, sister, and all of you on this call, on this podcast, on this show, we are the ones that we are waiting for. There is a shift. After this program, I'm going to the Prime Minister of my country. I've been to him already a couple of months ago and said to him, I am a representative of the Garifuna Nation. We are a people who educated this nation. We want to have dialogue with you. We want to thank you. I'm going to him this morning to thank them for appointing a Maya indigenous woman as a Garifuna, as a Governor General of the country. Whilst I'm not excited about Governor General, the point is that there is something that's happening here. The Governor General in Canada is an indigenous woman. So we will have conversations where the shift is going to, it's already taking place. There's a paradigm shift. I know it's taking place in the Caribbean because we are connecting. And sister, I'm so thankful that I'm meeting you this morning, because that widens the network, that widens the power, that widens the energy for us to break this cycle once and for all. Thank you.
Shuluhali Wadani, our time has come. Shuluhali Wadani, our time has come.
Yes, yes, indeed. Well, we have come to the end. I had on 15 minutes earlier because, people been texting me and said, but they want more. And I remember the first time when Vicky came, she was our second guest with Colonel Marcia Douglas. And it was a 3-hour podcast.
So women know how to talk.
Yes, and that was very interesting to say. It was a 3-hour, and we have cut it since then to 1 hour and added 15 minutes as a grace. So I'm going to ask Courtney to do the summary for us, and then we're going to get ourselves out of here. So we thank Queen Lubafu for taking time out this morning of her busy schedule. And I know that your Belizean people are welcoming you back this morning. And I also thank Victoria this morning for taking time out of her busy schedule in New York and for joining us this morning. Also to Tanya for being here as well, to Sam, Errol, Courtney, and all those who are inside the YouTube chat room. We thank you all for taking time out this morning and for being a part of our podcast. Courtney, could you go ahead with the summary for me, please?
Yes. Well, I just want to thank our guests again, Vicky and Queen Lubafu, for their real explanation about stuff. The Anthropocene theory is really interesting, and I really have to thank Vicky for giving us an explanation, and even mentioned something that I was interested in about the Holocene. But that will come for another time. Truly, with Queen Lubafu, what she was talking about, about networking, is truly inspiring, because without networking, the ideas can't come to the forefront, or solutions. And one of our interesting points is about going into the forest, and Vicky alluded to that too. And I think that reforestation can be a solution to the problem. See that deforestation had caused so many of these problems, then reforestation can be a solution. So maybe it's something that we can look into and discuss in the future. Again, I even thank our viewers and listeners to the Real Stuff podcast. Back to you, Franco.
All right. So please remember, subscribe, like, and share the video. The object of this channel is to educate you and entertain you as well. The Real Stuff podcast is your Caribbean podcast. So live and love every moment of your life. Be grateful for each new day. Cherish your family and friends. Bless others. Keep the faith. Never lose hope. And remember, prayer changes things. Regardless of what religion you belong to, you must pray and continue to pray. So, in the language of the Garifuna, which we always close off with, we're going to ask Queen Lubafu. You don't have to come on, Queen Lubafu. We already have your voice. So Queen Lubafu will say the Our Father.
She should do a live one today.
Yeah, well, all right. Flavius requested it.
Flavius. Okay. Wago shibugyu lida sungfula. You bila paruwe yawo. Adugwala lababusaru. Lida mua, lida sungfula. Lida mua, lida sungfula. Wagushi bungyo, lida sungfula. Yubila paruwe yawo. Adugwala lababusaru. Lida mua, lida sungfula. Do what you want with me, God. Do what you want.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
All right.
Well, unfortunately, this is it. Till next time. Bless.
Well, Tafina will take on myself to take us out of here. Once again, Vicky, Queen Lubafu, thank you, ladies, very much for taking time out this morning. All right.
All you gotta do is just speak. One word is enough, and I'm no longer so rough. I forget what I was trying to say. I no longer do what I was gonna do, but you're no good for me. That's why me know what set me if it could flee. Me I fi take away me say. Me I fi take away me say.
Well, unfortunately, this is it. Till next time. Bless. Well, unfortunately, this is it. Till next time. Bless.
But this relationship I'm gonna desist. But how can I face you when all I wanna do is just taste you? I know you think I play me, but soon you're gonna see the light of day. Just relax, don't move an inch. I'll be gone in a pinch. May I feel take away myself. May I feel take away myself. May I feel I like a thief in the night. May I forget all the sight.